Visit geoowl.com and learn how Geo Owl implements next-generation intelligence advancement technologies to aid the Department of Defense with precision and expertise analysis. Geo Owl.
The new era of intelligence.
Welcome to the Veteran Business Collective podcast.
I'm Avery Washington, and I'm joined by Nich Smith, the founder and CEO of Geo Owl. Nich, thanks for joining us today.
Appreciate you having me.
All right, glad to have you on the VBC podcast. So, let's get into it.
I'm ready.
Where are you from, Nich? How did we get to this point?
How did we get here? That's a good question. So originally from Florida.
Okay.
Grew up in the Tampa Bay area, and I joined the military when I was 18. You know, not too long after September 11th, and then when I finished my time in the military after a fun excursion to Iraq, I went to UNCW, University of North Carolina, Wilmington, and I just love the area. So.
Absolutely.
Continued on with my professional career in the military intelligence space. And then when I had a chance to bring my company back here after I started my company, I just hopped on it because I love the area so much. It's a nice small town community, but there's still plenty to do. You have the beach, you have the nice downtown. I know we got this cool photo right here behind
Absolutely.
us. And after living in some other large cities, I can tell you that it's just nice being somewhere where the pace of life is slowed down. Traffic isn't really a thing here. I mean, it's laughable.
We like to complain, but drive to D.C.
Yeah, go to D.C., go to Atlanta, go to L.A. That's traffic. This is, waiting 5 minutes for a light. So I'm not saying that so that you come down here, because definitely stay where you're at. We're getting plenty of people, plenty of population growth down here mainly from retirees. But, it's just a great area to live in and raise a family. So
Absolutely. All right. Well, you came in with the Cliff Notes, so we'll jump back a little bit.
All right.
So, one, I have a question. In joining the military, right? When I joined, I was dropping out of college, and I basically thought we would just be painting our faces and rolling off of zodiacs and slaying rock monsters. Right, did you have an idea of what you would be getting yourself into, or was it just, I'm doing this, we'll find out?
I had no idea. I mean, my concept, forget about did I know what I was doing. My whole concept of what the military was completely off. And I think a lot of young people in their teens and maybe a little older, they have a very skewed perspective of what the military is, and I'm no different, right? I mean,
Certainly.
I thought it was 1,000 people doing what you were just talking about, painting their faces and running around the woods. It's just not true, right? When I first arrived and I saw 2,000 people in a formation, I was like, "What's this? Is this everyone?" But you quickly learn and adapt to how things work in the military, and I have to say it's been the best decision I've ever made. So to this day, get to do cool things like participate in the VBC podcast because of it. Yeah.
So what did you do while you were in?
Yeah, I was an imagery analyst.
Okay.
So in the Army, the military occupational specialty is right now it's 35 Golf. It used to be 96 Delta when I was in. Okay. So did I have an idea of what that was? No. I had the person at MEPS was like, "Do you want to do this?" They look at satellites. Like, they look at satellites? Oh, that sounds cool. And then they're like, "Okay, do you want to be airborne?" I'm like, "What's that?" "Oh, they jump out of planes." Sure, that sounds cool when you're
that's awesome.
18. Yeah, that sounds great. If you combine those two, intelligence and airborne, you really only can be stationed at one location, and that's beautiful, lovely center of the universe, Fort Bragg, North Carolina.
Okay.
So
Nice. So you did get to go to airborne.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I got to go there. Yeah, I fell out of that plane a few times, and I had a few jumps while I was in. Have the hurt knees to to vouch for that. But it was definitely a cool experience. And
Certainly.
man, after my first jump, though, I thought I hit really hard that first jump, like really hard, and I was like freaking out for the second jump. And the second jump, I landed like, nice soft. And I was like, okay, this isn't so bad. And then, so anyways, continued that throughout the military until I got out.
Nice. I've heard a lot of people, Marines that go, refer to attending airborne as Marine Corps Appreciation School. Most people I've met have said that, but I've met a few that just really enjoyed it, which was a unique perspective.
Right. Oh, they saying that because it's easy?
I think they just found the interaction with, because normally Marines go when they're more senior.
Right.
And so in dealing with the junior soldiers, they find the interaction different than if they were dealing with their junior Marines.
Right.
So they just kind of think, what is wrong here? It's a different dynamic. So it's interesting to see.
Yeah, I mean, it's an Army-run school, so there's obviously going to be some different nuances between the Marine Corps and the Army.
Yeah.
But I thought it was a great experience. Part of that was because I got to hang out with some Marine and some Air Force people, and Navy people in other services, and I realized that there's a lot more to this than even
Definitely.
I knew at that point. So.
And it's different cultures, which is what makes them unique, is also what gives them their unique capability, right? And the things that foster it are going to require different interactions among their ranks and within their practices. So that's awesome. So you retired, correct?
No, I did not retire.
You did not retire. Okay.
No. I did 4 years active and then 3 in the reserves.
Oh, okay. Perfect.
Yeah.
I don't know. For some reason, I fast-forwarded 20 years in that. So
Thank
that's
you.
even better, right?
Is that how old I look? Is that what's happening here?
No. I just assumed you aged really well. So with that, what made you decide to transition out of the military?
Yeah, so if you're a recruiter, you probably want to turn this part off. Or if you're looking if you're looking to join the military, you probably want to turn this part off. The military is a big behemoth bureaucratic organization. With any big organization, things lapse, right? Standards fall on the edges and things like that. I always felt that the people that stayed in the military were the people that didn't really have a choice. And what I mean by that is I felt at the time that the best people weren't staying in as enlisted. And I was an enlisted guy. I think about it a little bit differently now. I do think there are some fantastic career military people, certainly. But the way that it felt when I was, at that E5, E4 rank was that there had to be more opportunity on the outside of the military. I just felt like not the best people stayed in, and I didn't want to be one of those people. And that was a main driver for me. Plus, I joined when I was 18 because I wanted to have something to do afterwards. That's why I picked the career that I picked, because I wanted to have a job afterwards. I wanted to have something to look forward to. And then on top of that, throughout my time in service, I did the GI Bill. I did the new GI Bill when that came around. So that, I had an investment in that to go to school. So that's what I did.
So, one, I can definitely understand what you're saying, because I can recall when I was in, and there were the select few senior leaders that you really wanted to see go to those most influential positions, right? That guy become the company ops chief, or this guy become the battalion commander, or a 2-star or wherever. And then you would slowly see them sift out, right? Or they'd even get the rank and get buried away somewhere with relatively little influence. And after seeing a pattern of that, you'd start to think, this isn't quite panning out the way I'd hope, never mind I would expect. I think When you seem to clearly observe who most people regard as the most capable leaders, not be put in the positions that they are most capable of relative to their peers,
Right.
I can definitely understand how that can be a little disheartening.
I always say in the military, you'll definitely learn two things. You'll definitely learn what a really good leader looks like, for sure. I mean, you will run into fantastic leaders. And the flip side of that is you will definitely experience what poor leadership looks like. And if you haven't been a part of an organization of any sort, whether that's, if you haven't had a job in a big company or whatever, you might not know why that matters, right? Why
Certainly.
leadership is so important. But in the military, you'll definitely experience both sides of that coin. And I felt when I got out, like I knew what good leadership looked like, and I felt that I could, that I possessed some of the qualities that I'd like to see in leaders, and I didn't need to spend 8 years in a waiting on some list to come out to tell me that my rank was good enough to be a leader.
So with that though, with transitioning, do you remember some of the challenges that you faced when you were deciding to leave active service?
Yeah, so I left right after I got back from Iraq,
Okay.
and I wanted to go to school, UNCW, and use the job bill that I invested in. So for me, I would say that the transition was to college. So, a little bit easier transition than like poof, you're out in the world, right, with nothing. So I had something to look forward to. I had a mission to accomplish, so to speak, of completing my degree and then, moving on from there. So I wouldn't say that it was difficult. I definitely say just at my age, I was 21, 22 years old, definitely didn't have great direction in terms of my own direction, not that there weren't people willing to provide that. But I think it's looking back on it now. I mean, I made the right decision, but
It definitely worked out.
it worked out all right. Are there things that you always wish you could do differently? Sure, but looking back now, I'm okay.
And what'd you get your degree in?
So that now you want to talk about changing some things. This is a big
Okay,
one
let's
thing
hear
I
this. Let's hear
would have
this.
changed. So I did go to Cape Fear Community College right off the
Okay.
bat because they have an agreement with UNCW that says once you finish your associates there, they have to take you at UNCW basically. So I majored in psychology.
Okay.
And I thought in my, young adult brain that with a security clearance and a degree in psychology, I could find a job doing something. But it turns out when I finished my degree, there weren't too many people hiring for that type of background, especially around here locally. So, yeah, I definitely would have picked a different degree. It was a nice experience, but, as far as what that degree has done for me personally, it provided a stopgap before I moved on with my life is what it was.
Certainly. Okay. I can understand that.
Yeah.
So what was next after finishing school to founding this company?
Yeah, so after school, like I said, I didn't have luck finding a job right away, so I actually went back to Florida and helped my brother. My brother was running a professional mixed martial arts organization.
Okay.
And he had a really awesome thing going, had a national television show, all sorts
That's
of live
incredible.
professional sporting events.
Wow.
So I got great exposure in terms of, running a business, essentially. I helped him run that business. So, I really learned a lot from him. But I got a, great exposure into media and marketing and the whole 9 yards, running, producing television, all that stuff I got exposed to. And I'll say that I probably learned more there than I did at the university, but it was called The Art of Fighting in Florida. And it was cool. We had 16 professional events. We had some awesome, fantastic. If you like MMA, we had some awesome fights. Some of the best fighters in the world come in, and it was just a great experience.
That's incredible. How long did that last for?
I did that for a few years, I think 3 years, and our largest sponsor was Full Tilt Poker. So if you remember
Okay.
back then, online poker was a big thing.
Mhm.
And I don't know what happened with the online poker thing. Something happened with the FBI or something. Whatever happened with those businesses. But that valve got shut off, right? So those sponsorship dollars dried up. So it ended up not being a very lucrative thing at the end once the online poker sponsorships went away. So I always knew I could get a job as a contractor doing military intelligence. So that's what I went back and did. I took a job with a big company up in D.C. Running a.
So were you able to?
Yep.
Did a part of that, or did getting that job in part have anything to do with the clearance at least?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So actually,
One of them came through.
yeah. So the clearance. I mean, that's definitely worth it, right? I mean,
Certainly.
if you have security clearance, you should be able to find a job somewhere. So it definitely played a role. But then having that military background of imagery analysis, and that really helped.
Okay. So you go from Florida to the D.C. area,
Mm-hmm.
and then how long are you there?
See, I'm there for about 3.5, 4 years.
Okay.
Somewhere around that amount of time. I'm working for a big defense company, and at that time, I really thought that they weren't taking great care of their people, and like I learned in the military, I thought the leadership was really bad. Just at least my direct leadership I thought was not great, and so I reached a point where I wanted to start my own thing, to
Absolutely.
build something that actually cares about the people and values the people doing the work a lot more, and eventually that's what I did.
That's something I've observed also, where sometimes in an organization that isn't being led very well, that sometimes a poor leader can treat the hardest resource to cultivate as if it were disposable.
Right.
And typically that is the performers or the people that it's comprised of. Right. So I've definitely observed that myself. So is that one of the catalysts that inspired you to create Geo Owl?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. I'd always kind of had an entrepreneurial mindset, but at the time I could see where the technology was going. I could see where intelligence was at as an intelligence community. I could kind of see where it was going, and I just knew I was going to start my own company at some point. So while it was a catalyst, it wasn't the only thing, right? It was definitely something that put some pep in your step when you're like, I'm going to show these people how this should actually work.
Can you get into the other things that you were confident that you were seeing the intelligence community trend toward? If not, like...
Yeah, so I had a very specific skill set, right? I'm working in this field called geospatial intelligence, work with a lot of ISR assets, manned and unmanned, and I could just see it proliferating throughout the world. And, I also knew that there was a very limited amount of people that actually knew how to do it well.
Certainly.
Right? So I knew that I was one of the few people that knew how to do it well. And the reason I knew that is because whenever we hired new people at my old job, they would all be like scratching their heads, and they'd take 2-3 years to get to where I was at. So I knew that there was a limited number of people on Earth that really know this stuff well. So I could see where the technology was going. It's getting more pervasive in terms of intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. And I knew that the experts in it were very limited. So that was, kind of a foundational aspect to my thought process.
All right. So from this, you've observed the writing on the wall and the direction that your field is trending toward. The organization isn't quite being run the way you think would be ideal. How do you go from idea to action?
Yeah, that's great. I mean, it definitely took some time to put it into motion. And what I mean by that is to say, what do I actually, like, how do I actually make something out of nothing, right?
Literally.
How do you make something out of nothing? So I started talking to people, and I just started floating ideas out there of what I wanted to do. And luckily enough, I ran into some people that really gave me great advice and great direction. One of those is in my company today. His name's Jim Moore. He's our Chief Growth Officer. And, I can't say it enough. I mean, just when you know good advice when you hear it.
Certainly.
And I followed that advice. And, I took the steps necessary that were, along the veins of that advice, and of course it was right. So I also say that if we're just talking about starting a business in general, for anyone starting a business, the first thing you should do is find the customer, right? Find one customer. Doesn't matter what it is, because in order to get the action steps you need to have a customer that can help lead you there.
Okay.
Right? Because the customer has, they have needs, right?
Certainly.
And logically, to take the steps you need to get to that customer, to get to their pocketbook, the revenue, whatever you want to call it, to fix their problem, you need to have some, in my opinion, a way to focus on that, right? So, a customer will say, "Hey, I have this need for someone to mow my lawn," right?
Yes.
Well, okay. So I'm starting a lawn care company. What are the things I need to do to mow your lawn? Well, I need to buy equipment. I need to make a schedule, things like that. So what I'm saying is things become a lot more logical once you have a customer. Once you have someone or an organization, a business, whatever it is your customer, to actually put things in motion, it makes more sense once you have that.
Okay.
Starting out with an idea of, I want to start a, let's say, company that sells, funny hats, right? That's great. But is there a need for that funny hat? Find one person that wants that funny hat first, and then say, why do you want this funny hat?
Certainly.
Yeah.
I think there are very few people who could put that in the need category.
Right. Well, it is. There's a demand for funny hats out there.
There is some.
But you got to find that customer that's going to buy your funny hat first before you start putting your business plans into action, right? Because then you become the channel in which their needs are met.
Absolutely.
That's why finding your customer first is the most important thing when starting a business.
Okay. So you got some great advice. More importantly, you executed on that great advice, right? And your company's up and running. It's formed, and it's the ball is rolling. With that, we talked earlier, and you had mentioned contracting, right? And I've heard people, some entrepreneurs specifically get into businesses that deal with government contracting.
Right.
What were some of the challenges you faced initially with learning more about it, learning how to, or more successfully bidding on contracts? Is that the correct verbiage?
Sure. Yeah.
Things of that nature.
So the government contract business is a behemoth for anyone just coming off the street to learn. You actually see a lot of business owners in my space, successful ones, are people that used to be government contracting people because they understand how it works. It takes a while to understand the life cycle, the sales life cycle. It takes a while to understand the rules and where they apply and where they don't. Decorum, things like that. It takes a hot minute to understand that. That is to say, I wouldn't dissuade anyone from doing it.
Mm-hmm.
It just takes a second to learn. And I'm always open to learn, so I think I would say that the most important thing in this space, and it might be true in a lot of spaces, is developing good relationships with people and being a stand-up person, being good to your word, and doing what you say you're going to do, and actually bust your tail to get the job done. Because at the end of the day, there's work that needs to be done, and if it's not being, if the needs of that customer aren't being met, then you're done. You got to find something else.
And you're leaving them with the problem
That's right.
that they thought was going to be solved.
Right. Yeah.
Absolutely. Is there anything this is something that I hear come up fairly often for transitioning veterans with an entrepreneurial interest. Is there anything you'd recommend someone considering getting into the defense contracting realm that they read, listen to educate themselves a bit more about it, or groups they immerse themselves in, whatever it may be?
Yeah, all that. So if you are interested in defense contracting, I definitely recommend listening to our podcast, the Geo Owl podcast. I have some great episodes where we go over specific things that you can do to get started.
Let's plug it.
It's fine.
Is that the name of the channel?
Yeah, it's our company podcast. So
Geo Owl podcast.
Yeah, definitely check that out. But more specifically, so we're in North Carolina. There's things like the North Carolina, I think it's called the Military Business Center.
Okay.
So there's some great resources there. I think you'll only learn in this space by doing.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to start your own company, you're coming out of the military, you want to start your own company, that's going to be very difficult.
Certainly.
Very difficult. Unless you have something there, like some type of relationship built up and somebody knows who you are, or maybe you're retiring. Without that, if you're just looking to start a company like mine coming out of the military, I would say go work at one of these big companies. Go work at one of these big defense contractors and spend time in their business development units. Understand their processes for how they develop business, how they respond to requests for information, how they actually build requirements from scratch, how the proposal process works, how the programs are actually managed, how the financials of it. A lot of these big companies, they have built-in methods for learning these things. They have built-in learning management systems where you can go in and learn the infrastructure of the companies. Geo Owl also, we do that, right? But we're not like some big behemoth where we can just hire 1 million people. Just go do it and then start your company after that, because you'll be miles ahead, because in this space, it only takes one contract for your entire life to be flipped upside down. So in a good way, or in a bad way. It can go very bad, or it can go very good. But I definitely go and do it first.
So I wasn't aware of that, the bad way part. You don't ever hear about it, to be honest with you.
If you pay close attention, you do.
Well,
yeah.
I don't ever hear about it.
Right. But you do hear about, so let's say JEDI, right? You've heard of this big giant Pentagon cloud contract?
No. Let's hear about it.
Okay. All right. You'll have to forgive me. I don't have the exact nuances of it down, but
I won't judge you for it.
Long story short, the Pentagon was looking to acquire a cloud service provider.
Okay.
So all the big companies, Amazon, I believe Google, Microsoft, they all go and bid on this thing, and it's a multi-billion-dollar cloud services contract. And I think it was Microsoft who won. I could be wrong about that. But then Amazon protested it, right?
They like doing
that. So that and I gave you a very condensed story. So that story played out over years.
Mm-hmm.
So that one acquisition alone took a really long time, and then they ended up, I believe they just canceled it, and now they want a multi-cloud solution, right? So imagine yourself as a small business owner waiting for these things to come through. I mean, it takes 2-3 years for anything to actually come to fruition. So it's a big, massive. I always say that the industry that I'm in it's a marathon. It's not a sprint.
Okay.
It's a marathon. It's not a sprint, because a lot of things that you think would take a month take a year, and things that you think would take a year take a decade.
So just because that the other company contested the results,
That's right.
that stalled the process?
Yeah, the government has regulations that they have to adhere by.
Okay.
And if there are issues in the acquisition, or at least perceived issues in the acquisition, where one company doesn't think that their proposal was evaluated properly, then they can do a legal protest, and then there's various agencies that are responsible for running these protests. One of them is the Government Accountability Office, so they'll come in and say, did you run this acquisition the right way according to the rules and regulations? Did you look at each proposal carefully? Did you evaluate them properly? Did you inform each vendor properly? All that sort of thing. So it can be a lengthy, messy process at times. And I can't tell you how many times we've been bidding on stuff and things change, or they move it, or we win but it gets protested, or we lose but it gets protested, and then we're waiting, and then we don't hear anything, and then it goes up, right, and or things get shuffled around, and like I said, the process just takes forever. And it's one of the big reasons why I think, as a whole, our federal acquisition regulations just need to be tossed out the window. I mean, we're in an age of technology now, where things are evolving so rapidly. The next development toolkit that comes out might have these features that exponentially increase what you can do with the next set of software tools, but it will take 5 years before the government can access that.
So that makes me wonder, or that gives me the question, what would you change about the process if you had the ability to change something about the process?
Yeah. So I've been asked this question before.
You've got some reps in, so I assume you're familiar with it enough to have observed. It seems really inefficient or
ineffective. Very inefficient. It's very inefficient and often ineffective. There's, a lot of the rules are put in place in order to have a fair, competitive environment, and that's good. But it's almost like the medicine is worse than the disease, right? Okay. Because if the regulation is forcing such lengthy processes, if the regulation is reducing the amount of innovation that we're receiving as a country, right, the U.S. government, then those are no good, in my opinion, because innovation should be the pinnacle. That should be the thing that the world's number one consumer, the United States government, should look for innovation first. Innovation is what drives down costs. It's what makes our dollars go further. It's what makes $400 4K TVs possible. It's things moving faster, better, at a lower cost.
Certainly.
So that should be the goal. And if that was the goal, then you could formulate your acquisition regulations around innovation. That would be a big thing I would change, is just putting innovation as the top thing. Okay. And then everything else would have to fall around it. Is that going to happen? Who knows? Who knows?
Yeah, I doubt it will happen quickly.
Yeah. As a taxpayer, you should want it to happen, though, because you're taxed at a rate in there, and do you even know what happens to that money?
No.
Well, a lot of it's tied up in this type of thing, and it's just kind of wasted, right? It's wasted paying some government person to sit there for a year while their main program is under protest or something like that, or purchasing systems that are suboptimal for their purposes. So.
Well, no, I appreciate you explaining that. It's definitely something I'm not very familiar with, and I imagine folks listening are certainly aware of the reality of government contracting, but maybe don't know much detail. So no, that's super helpful. So along with that, right, I'm also aware that you are an investor. Can you talk more about how you started with investing and what you like to invest in?
Yeah, so I've been buying stocks since I was 18, essentially. So I started with doing stocks, right?
Okay.
And I definitely made some big mistakes when I was younger because I was trying to pick winners, right? You're trying to pick winners, and I would just say, don't ever try to pick winners. No one can predict the future. No one.
In contrast to that, though, what would you say you pick now?
In terms of like what stocks I would pick?
Well, not by name, not necessarily by, but in contrast to that, say, and maybe it's just trivial, but say, as opposed to trying to pick winners, I'm picking proven performers or whatever. Is there a new thing that you would say you are picking now as you've changed how you invest, as you've gotten more experience?
Yeah, so I definitely, you always hear about diversifying your portfolio. That's definitely the only thing proven to work over time is having a diversity of options. So if one thing fails and the other thing can hopefully succeeds, so that's definitely important. I don't ever want to put all my eggs in one basket. In terms of picking winners and losers, I still do that a little bit, right?
Okay.
You still try to look at certain companies that you think are pushing the boundaries. Like I was invested in Tesla a long time ago, and that's paid off very well to this point.
Certainly.
And I still look at them as a company that as far as pushing the boundaries, other markets that they can access and grow their market share. I would definitely recommend them. But in terms of an overall investing strategy, the way I approach it is I can't predict the future. You can't predict the future. Let's diversify. Let's invest in a lot of different things. So I have stocks. I have businesses, obviously, that I run beyond just Geo Owl. There's other ones. And I have real estate, things like that. Crypto, a little bit of crypto. Definitely recommend that because who knows where that's going to go, right?
I'm interested to hear your thoughts on crypto briefly, though, because typically when I speak to people about it, and granted I don't know a ton, but I do think about it, I'm just not tech savvy.
Yeah.
So in 2017, I was on a deployment, ironically. So on this deployment, well, two things happened. One, I kept reading these articles about Bitcoin. It hit a record price of $2,800.
$2,800, yeah.
And I literally spent 3 months trying to figure out how to make a Coinbase account. I couldn't figure it out.
Right.
By the time I got home, it was $17,000.
Yep.
But what I could figure out while I was on the deployment was how to buy stocks. So I remember buying Tesla at $300-ish a share.
Oh, there you go.
And just hoping I didn't make a terrible decision.
You didn't. You made a great decision.
I know, right? Now it's clear that it worked out. But I remember thinking, please don't let this be a bad idea.
Right.
I bought, it was Tesla, Amazon, and Google. And
it all worked out.
And I was just thinking, this seems like a lot. I hope this works out.
Well, let's be real. I mean, technology companies, that's where the growth is at, because
Definitely.
as technology becomes online in different markets, those companies become more and more relevant.
What drew you to crypto?
So I don't have a massive crypto portfolio at all, but it is a section of what I have. So a couple things. I think I have a firm understanding of the technology behind crypto, what blockchain is all about. And I just see it as an alternative to the U.S. dollar, as a offset to inflation, sort of like the way that precious metals has been for umpteenth years. So I definitely see it as an offset for that. But the fact that you could have a little invested and you could see 170,000% gains, to me that's worth putting a section of my portfolio in, because maybe you have these hyperbolic type of gains, but you never.
Shiba Inu being an example.
Yeah, sure. I mean, what's the other one?
Crazy.
Dogecoin, all these crazy coins. So even within crypto, I have a diversity of cryptos, because I don't predict the future. One of these might take off, maybe not. But
It's interesting because I've spoken to a few people about it, and over the years, really within the last few decades, you've seen parallel systems be created. You've seen it with transportation and things like Uber and Lyft, with hospitality, right, with the number of short-term rental platforms. And now you're seeing it in finance with cryptocurrency, where you have these parallel systems that increase the utility of something that we've all, as society, have come to be dependent on, essentially, right? But it increases the utility of it to more people more effectively, right? That car that you just had and parked in the driveway and cost you $300 a month, now it can make $300 a month, and other people can use it and not just wait for the cab to pass by and they stick their arm out on the street, right? And watch the meter tick up at every light. Or the hotel's booked up, but now the house that would just be empty, you can stay there, and it can pay for itself instead of kicking a property manager X amount a month. And now this currency, right, that you can send 24/7, costs significantly less, and buy in essentially infinitely divisible portions, right, and store larger, and store amounts in ways that you find, say, more trustworthy,
Right.
reasonably have a deflationary character to them, vice the way the country's currently handling currency.
Right.
So it's interesting to observe these things occur, and in this condensed time period. I don't really know what to make of it. I just wonder if I'll look back when I'm old and just think, man, why couldn't you have figured that out sooner?
Yeah.
It's interesting to see.
Yeah. Well, technology, it doesn't, it compounds, right? Because if you have an innovation in medicine and robotics, right, you can use both of them at the same time, right? So you have a hyperbolic curve of technology. It doesn't just, it's like compound interest, right?
Certainly.
It gets, the more it grows, the better, right? And the more utility. So, what you're saying is definitely true. A lot of.
Well, the other thing that, to transition a bit though, because I don't want to go too far off topic, because we'll save that for the three things you want to share for the world. But you have some unique insight because you're also on the board of directors with the Veteran Business Collective.
Yeah.
Right. So with that unique insight that you have in your involvement, what are some of the things? Well, one, what drew you to be a part of the VBC? And then what are some of the things that you're excited about, right, that are in the works that maybe you can share?
Yeah, so the VBC is a great organization. I mean, partially what drew me to it was I've always felt like there was a network of other veterans out there that were kind of younger. They're my age, right? They're not the VFW. They're not the American Legion. They're not necessarily wounded. They're just normal people living their lives, and they need a place to network and socialize too. And I think that's what the VBC, what sets the VBC apart from these other organizations, these other veterans organizations, which are all awesome, by the way. DAV, like I mentioned, some of them, VFW, American Legion, all these organizations are great. They're kind of legacy. They've been around for a while. But they're not committed. They're committed to making sure veterans are taken care of, which is fantastic. But VBC is committed to helping veterans thrive, do better in life, because of the networks and connections we have with each other. And that to me is what drew me to it. Was, I'm healthy, relatively
So-
speaking. And, I have a lot of need for veteran resources necessarily. But, there's a great social aspect to it, right? Everybody needs to have friends, and everybody needs to have a network that they can rely on. And who better than veterans? Like, we're all kind of chummy with each other, it
Certainly.
doesn't matter what service you're in. Everyone kind of gets it. A lot of us have, been to all the fun locations and things like that. So that's what drew me to it initially. And then what was the second part of that question?
What are some of the things that you're looking forward to
Yeah.
that are in the works?
Yeah, so a couple things. So one, we're looking for ways to continue to help veterans thrive, period, carte blanche, in their professional life and their business life. So we're looking at ways that we can incentivize membership in VBC by providing actual legit business reasons for it, right? Professional reasons. So things like grants, things like, starting new companies. We see a lot of that already with people that start companies, and then everything they do in that company comes from within our group because, who can you rely on more than your fellow veterans. So to me, that's really exciting, is just providing more value to the members we have already, and then new members that come on board, they're going to have just more bang for their buck because they're actually going to get access to these cool things that we're doing. And we're starting to see a lot of interest just kind of percolate throughout different parts of the country. People that come out to an event, they're like, okay, I get it, right? I get it. These are veterans that want to succeed in life. They don't want to just have their basic needs met, right? They're willing to work, hardworking people, and it's a great group of people that really support one another. So I'm really just looking forward to continuing that growth. I mean, I think that's the larger the network is, the stronger it becomes, because each person is a resource. That's the way we see it. And I'm 100%. I've already spent some time with some of our members, helping them start their businesses and get funding and things like that. And I'm hoping that I can continue to be a resource like that. And then I know for a fact there's other people within the organization that are helping out as well. So
That's excellent.
yeah.
Looking forward to the things in the works as well. I remember, what was it, late 2020, going to the first meeting and thinking, wow, this is good. It's like a good turnout.
Yeah.
A couple dozen people or so, and just thinking, wow, I hope this continues.
Yeah.
And hats off to Chase for being able to get that off the ground as well, because I've tried to do similar things without the same
Right.
level of success.
Right.
So definitely admire that. That's awesome.
Yeah. I think there's, like I said, I think there's a big need for that, right? Is, like people that go through college or whatever, right? They have their alumni association, right? And they can kind of rely on them. Right. And they kind of have that group. We don't really have a veterans alumni, right? I mean, most people that are in the military didn't go to West Point or the Naval Academy and things like that. So it's good to have a group that's almost like a veterans alumni network that's dedicated to professional and business success. Like that's really awesome. So
That is an excellent explanation. I know that's something I really appreciate. There's a difference that you can recognize in a group that's paid a price to action, that's shaped who they are, right? There's this common thread, and maybe you can't just put a finger on it because they're from different jobs within the military, different branches, different decades.
right. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Right. But there's this common thread that it's nearly tangible, that you can have a common understanding with this group of people. And it's definitely a great dynamic to be able to keep for as long as you can hold on to it. So I can completely understand that.
Yeah, it's a shared experience. Everyone has that shared experience of serving their country, and I think you'll find most veterans, actually valued that time that they spent in service, and it continues to be a part of them no matter what. I mean, even that dumb 18-year-old I was joining the military at the time. Today I look back at it, I'm really glad that I did that. Not just because it I was able to lead into a career, but to me it means something to me now that I spent that time serving my country when I had the chance to.
Definitely.
When I was young enough.
It definitely creates this well-rounded, a more well-rounded understanding of the world we live in, right? That it's not all McDonald's and iPhones and power and water, but you've seen some other places and other environments and extreme walks of life where you realize, one, how fortunate we are, and two, honestly, it just how quickly things can change in some instances. So it's definitely something that allows you to be a little more grateful, have some gratitude.
Yeah, and if you look at what's happening in Ukraine right now, which we haven't talked about yet, which is fun.
No worries.
We shouldn't have to wait for someone to invade our country to have a combined sense of belonging here, right? The United States is, by and large, I don't care what people say, it is the best country on the face of the earth. It is the ideal that other countries should look to achieve because we have maximum freedom, right? We have the most freedom that you can have within the boundaries and rules of law. And we value things like individual liberty. We value things like a justice system with due process. And it's not perfect, but it's as perfect as been built so far. And when you serve in the military, you represent that, right? And you have a shared sense of this is who we are. And as veterans, you don't have to wait for something bad to happen to have that kind of tie to your country because you've served, so you understand that the good and the bad
absolutely
comes with it.
It's ironic that you say that because over the past, I think few years is an understatement, but we'll say few years, handful of years, the country has definitely seemed more divided than ever. And it's interesting to see how such an extreme event can bring people together, but I agree it shouldn't take something like that.
Right.
Or it's unfortunate that it takes something like that for people to
So
sift
I'd
through.
like to challenge that a little bit.
Yeah.
Though. I mean, this is a country that went through a civil war. So are we now divided more than we were during the Civil War? I don't think so. I think what we have are different ways to access the people yelling on each side. So we have this perception that we're all divided, but I just don't think that's really the case. I don't think it's more than it's ever been.
You know what?
I think
agree.
today we are actually more united than we've ever been. We just get into our tribal silos of information, and then we have technology to make sure that we are fed a consistent meal of left or right-sided information. So
I think you're right.
I think it's a misperception.
Yeah. You saying that and me applying some objective thought to it, I agree. I think there's a majority of people who either don't feel that strongly about a number of things or are fairly objective about reality. And then there's a minority on both ends that have an increased ability to proliferate their opinion to the rest of the world who didn't ask for it.
Yeah.
So it seems
I mean,
like there's a
1,000 people on Twitter sounds like a lot of people, but it's not a lot of people. It's just 1,000 people that are angry about something, or maybe they're not even angry. Maybe they're just trolls. Like there's 1,000 people trolling XYZ company to cancel this person. It's just it's all about perspective and looking at
Fair enough.
history and saying, is this really the case? It actually gets into one of my points there about my second
Let's
thing.
transition then.
If you want to transition.
So 3 things that you would just like to share with the world.
Yeah, so I think just to continue with what we were talking about, the second thing that I had there was skepticism is healthy, right? I think really COVID hit on this perfectly. We saw how many things were being put out in the media, even being put out by the government, that are now laughable, right? I remember when Trump said that, this thing escaped from a lab in Wuhan. And, I'm not a super huge right or left person. And I was like, okay, that sounds kind of silly. But now you look at it, you're like, that guy was right. All the things about masking and stuff. I think, over time, we'll find out what the real deal was. But I think being skeptical about things that we're not certain of is healthy. And say, do we actually think through these issues? And I think part of that is understanding that nuance matters, right? Nuance, slogans are great, but understanding the secondary and tertiary effects of things is critical to understanding the way the world actually works, right? It's fun to say defund the police, but what are the things that fall from that?
The reality is,
for sure,
not that simple.
It's not that simple. It's a catchphrase, and now we see that was not a great idea, right? It's not working out anywhere. So I just think skepticism is healthy. So anytime you see something and you're not certain of it, ask yourself: is this real? Is this true? Is this actually the way that it works? And there's nothing wrong with saying you don't know. I think there's a lot of things like podcasts, right? We're on this podcast right now. This didn't exist 20 years ago, right? Where people can give their opinions on all sorts of different things. So a lot of times people are asked, like the last LeBron James, what he thinks about the invasion of Ukraine, but does it matter what LeBron James thinks? I mean, it does to an extent. I'm not going to say that what someone like him thinks doesn't matter, but it's not his core expertise. And if I hear LeBron James or Cardi B saying something, I might say, is this the way that I feel? Is this actual? Is this legit?
I've thought about something along this line before, and a lot of times when someone demonstrates that they're exceptionally good at something, people have an interest in their opinion on a number of things that they are not exceptionally good at or informed in. I am probably one of the people that don't have an interest unless you are also exceptionally good or informed with regard to those things also.
Right.
But I think that's a big part of it, right?
But even those people, even when they say something, skepticism is still healthy in that essence. Whether it's LeBron James or Anthony Fauci, you still need to have a healthy skepticism.
Definitely.
I remember when this whole thing with masks was starting, my first thought was like, how big are the holes in the mask versus the size of the virus? Like, this is just common sense thought process here. I still don't really know the answer to that, but my thought process was, if the virus is smaller than the holes in the mask, then the masks are useless, right? I mean,
my other thought was, what does any living organism do with more time?
Right.
It evolves. So this strategy seems to be the opposite of what would work. That was the first thought I had with the just wait it out. I was like, these things die of loneliness or something? They hang out in the house with you, it goes away. Like, it doesn't quite add up.
Right.
It's weird. I remember the whole thing playing out. The 2 weeks turning into 6 weeks. I'm a realtor.
Right.
So after about 30 days, people got tired of video showings, and it was like, all right, we're all going to risk it because we need to get paid, right? Yeah. But I remember thinking about this doesn't make sense. What are we waiting to happen?
Right.
Realistically, it seems like we would just all be in our house, and then the numbers will go down, and then we'll go outside, and then the numbers will go up. But now you've just given more time for whatever this is to fester in everyone's individual environment, and then you're going to come up with mutations. Like, that's what I reasonably assumed.
Right.
Granted, I don't know the life cycle for something mutating or evolving,
Right.
but it seemed inevitable. It was kind of strange to me. So it's interesting you bring that up, because I definitely thought something similar, that these things don't make sense, even from expert or not.
Right.
This doesn't add up to
I
me.
think the solution, at least from a government perspective, should always be let people make their own decisions. I mean, for the most part, that's the way to go, right? That's people, especially in this country where we value things like individual liberty, let people make their own decision. You know, don't force them to wear a mask or get a vaccine or something like that. That's not what this country stands for. We stand for individual liberty. We want people to make their own choices,
Certainly.
good or bad, right? And that's up to them, right? That's freedom. That's what freedom is all about. Okay, so that was my second one, was skepticism is healthy.
Okay.
My first one actually is probably the best one, which
Let's
is
hear it.
everyone poops.
Okay.
Everyone poops. And when I say everyone, I mean everyone in history poops. So that means Abraham Lincoln, he's a pooper. George Washington, the guy pooped all the time. No, but the more serious part to that is that we're all humans. We're all people. We all make mistakes. We all have natural bodily functions that we have to take care of. We all have, you know, Maslow's hierarchy of needs to take care of. And there's a few ways you can think about this, right? One is, you know, to me, thinking about what we deal with as humans in terms of battling things like addiction, poor health, bad upbringing, and things like that. To me, when I think about our condition as humans, and then I see someone be successful in something, that is amazing, right? And we should celebrate that. Like, this person grew up in the ghetto, and they were beat as a child, and that here they are, they started a business, and they're successful. Like, that's amazing. Like, that to me makes life more interesting, right? When you think about it from a human perspective. But also, it should embolden people to actually make, courageous decisions in their life, right? Go talk to that person that you're afraid to talk to, because that person poops, right? That person is going to have to take a break at some point, you know. And then, how intimidating are they when they're pooping? If you're getting ready to do an interview with someone, you know, you can always think about that, right? This person's going to have to take crap at some point. It's just an interesting way to think about, humans and the fact that we all have flaws, and it should also impose some humility, you know, because you got to poop too, and I just think it's an interesting way to frame that. So that was the first one I wrote down, and then the third one was nothing is out of reach. And what do I mean by that is, I remember when I was, I want to say I was 8 or 9 or something like that. And I had this idea for this device that you can make phone calls on, but it ran off of advertisements, and I had this picture and stuff like that, and I was like, oh, this is going to be free phone services. And I was, thinking about that, looking back at it, I was like, that was a smartphone, really, is what it was. The ideas that we have are really special and spectacular. And that if you think that you can't achieve it, then you won't, right? If you say, that's not possible, then you won't take the steps necessary. But I really do believe that there's something strong about believing that nothing that you perceive is out of reach as long as you can imagine it, right? And I talked earlier about finding that customer and making those logical steps to get to that customer. Well, it's the same way with anything. I think finding that end state, right, and building up that logical bridge to get there is, means that nothing that we can create with our minds is out of reach. I mean, look at what SpaceX is doing. I mean, this is crazy.
It's insane.
Unbelievably
impressive.
Why didn't anyone think to reuse the rockets? Hello? I mean, we're spending millions of dollars and then we just throw them in the trash, like disposable plastic cups. I mean, look at, self-driving cars, look at Amazon Web Services. I mean, these are really amazing things that somebody just thought, hey, would it be cool if there was a cloud thing and all this stuff plugged in there and you could run your apps off of it? Somebody just thought of that. So I really think that, if you can think of something, if you can imagine it, that there is a way to get there. No matter how crazy you think it is, we're all confined to these human brains, and we're not going to come up with anything that's outside of reach. I really believe that.
I do as well. That is something I've thought about before, where a lot of these individuals have either refined or created things that have benefited humanity permanently from its point of creation forward. And these things tend to be, and these people who have done this tend to be some of the most successful or the wealthiest or well-known people in the world. So it's very interesting to see that in that correlation. I know that most people don't often think of it in that aspect, but it's definitely something that I've given thought to.
And all those people that you mentioned, they all poop. So remember
That's
that.
True. That's true.
Each one of them.
Nice. That's a perfect way to wrap this thing up. Well, I appreciate you talking with me today. And again, this is Nich Smith, founder and CEO of Geo Owl. I appreciate your time. I'm Avery, Washington. This is the VBC Podcast.
Thanks for checking out the VBC Podcast.